So Putin has issued an urgent statement about negotiations with Ukraine or with the USA, and Trump is applying the carrot and stick method to Russia. Let's talk about how to force the aggressor to negotiate on the terms of a just peace right now. My name is Uzlova, and today with us is host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report, communication instructor at the University of Wisconsin, and a county supervisor in Rock County, Wisconsin. Yuri, hello, glad to see you.
Glad to see you, Irina.
Our Russian leader Vladimir Putin claims that he is ready to hold talks with Ukraine regarding the war. However, for this, the Ukrainian president must allegedly lift the ban on negotiations with Russia. According to him, the negotiations will be illegitimate if Zelensky doesn't lift this ban on them. Putin said also that Trump's victory in the 2020 election was stolen, and if this had not happened, maybe there would not have been the crisis in Ukraine that arose in 2022. Putin called his relations with Trump business-like, pragmatic and trusting. Yuri, is Putin really ready for negotiations, or is it just a bluff? Is Putin scared maybe of Trump's threats, and what position can he take against the backdrop of these risks in the negotiations, which he really needs?
I think that stick and carrot is a really good way to describe the situation that we're dealing with in terms of choices that lay before the current administration, because the choice is either to apply new sanctions or existing sanctions to Russia, and the other thing is to continue military aid to Ukraine. We see that there's already disinterest in, well, there's talk of sanctions and tariffs from President Trump towards Vladimir Putin if Vladimir Putin doesn't agree to Donald Trump's idea of peace and sit down and start following President Trump's instructions. Then Vladimir Putin is going to get all sorts of tariffs, I guess, for everything that he sells to the United States, except there isn't very much. Even vodka, when people were concerned about trying to get rid of Russian vodka after full invasion of Ukraine in 2022, it turned out that most of Russian vodka isn't actually made in Russia at all, probably why it's pretty good. So stick and carrot, you have sanctions and you have military aid to Ukraine. And we see that President Trump has shown no interest in, on one hand, continuing military aid to Ukraine, but on the other hand, at least, I feel like being grateful for the fact that the current end to international assistance, which was looking really scary, I think, to people who were concerned about continuous aid to Ukraine, so far turned out to be financial aid to foreign governments, which is also very, impactful, because it is my impression that Ukraine's budget in large part depends on this financial assistance. Therefore, if we're going to cut the budget of Ukraine so they could pay their teachers, their civil employees, just state employees and people, pensions, all of those things, it really doesn't make the situation in Ukraine any better. It doesn't help end the war in any respectful way at all. But that is better than ending military aid to Ukraine, which continues to be at the moment of our conversation ongoing, which is fantastic and great, because there's already a lot of orders being placed that are being fulfilled for more military aid to Ukraine. Now, so those are choices that President Trump has, and so far he's leaning way more towards the tariff and trade impact, although he did mention other countries that may be involved in this. So maybe there is a way to push the sanctions train further. But how is Vladimir Putin responding to this? I think so far it's hard to say that Vladimir Putin is terrified or scared. I mean, if you're a YouTuber and you're trying to get your audience to see things a certain way and views will be there accordingly, then you say, yes, Vladimir Putin is terrified. He's in panic in his bunker. And, we wish that was the case. But I don't know to what extent he's really terrified terrified because seeing Donald Trump running after him, trying to persuade him to listen to him, I think it makes Putin, should make Putin feel in a pretty strong position. And so how is he going to go further and want to sit? How is this going to motivate Putin to sit down at a negotiation table and respect Ukraine is hard to see, especially after everything that Donald Trump has said about the war in the last couple of days, which is just, I think, should be dispiriting. But yet I'm continuously amazed by people in Ukrainian information space, and American as well, who will see some kind of hope that this is like that Donald Trump is going to really show and stick it to Putin right after this. Right after what?
But twice this week, Trump talked about sanctions against Russian Federation. So it seems to me that you don't believe that Trump can make these sanctions stronger. But if we can imagine it, under what condition will Trump really tighten sanctions against Russia?
Well, this goes back to the question of to what extent it is important to President Trump to seem like a winner and then not a wiener. And so that's a difference of pronunciation, but it's a big difference in perception. On the other hand, what he's dealing with is a crowd of supporters who are going to declare him a winner no matter what he does. So on that level, it's not exactly clear why he's even concerned about continuing to punish Russia when it's pretty clear he doesn't want to punish Russia. He feels a lot of compassion for Russian people and for Vladimir Putin personally. So, well, if there is any compassion in Donald Trump, it probably is for Vladimir Putin or his power and his respect and all of those things. So it's sanctions, I think, are good. We also are seeing a lot of talk. And talk is something that President Trump is really good at and really effective at. But we also need to see actions, and we need to see budgets, and we need to see budget proposals and what Congress is going to do. And we remember how the situation functioned under President Biden when there was a request that Congress would address. Well, is there going to be a request from President Trump for more military aid to Ukraine? Doesn't seem likely at this point, which means that ultimately Putin can't be too scared, because then it's only a question of what is the durability of his economic machine. Now, we don't know how strong his economic machine is. There's a lot of people who suggest that if Russia stops and ends the war, Russia will fall apart because it's now designed to be like a military state. If it is not at war, then what is it doing? It's not doing it. It's not certainly not helping people live better lives. So it's set up for war. So maybe Putin doesn't even want to stop doesn't even want to have a ceasefire, and to have conversations comparing, let's say, Ukraine with Korea, to me just highlights, or Israel, highlights to me in what unique situation Ukraine is, because we do not have our troops in Ukraine like we do between South and North Korea, and we don't have the years of partnership with Ukraine that we've had with Israel going back decades and decades. Frankly, Ukraine is in the wrong neighborhood. And Ukraine happens to be in Russia's neighborhood. And when it comes to President Trump, he sees things very regionally, apparently. And therefore, it's part of our American region, Greenland and Canada and Panama, at least the Panama Canal if necessary. But Ukraine, that's more of a Russian neighborhood. So I think that general policy is clear. How that is going to play out, there's going to be a lot of bluster, a lot of loud statements. But in the meantime, where is military aid? When there's no military aid, when there's no budget aid for Ukraine, it means the situation in Ukraine is going to get worse. And it's possible that Europe is going to step up. But even though many Americans voted for Donald Trump and many voted for Kamala Harris, and we feel like we did all we could and now it's over for a while, we should keep in mind that we still have a certain sense of responsibility and obligation to people across the world for a variety of reasons, from the fact that we signed such things as Budapest Memorandum to the fact that people look at America and expect better of us. And if we are done with that part, that we're now just going to be a transactional country, then it's certainly going to affect how people will view America and Americans. And I think that since we're going to be victims of this perception anyway, no matter if we voted for Donald Trump or not, then we might as well take responsibility and accountability and take leadership in getting the situation addressed, and understand that we need to support Ukraine, even individually, even if our government and state is reluctant. Let's say reluctant right now. That means that there's more responsibility for Americans to step up on an individual level to help support Ukraine, as many have already done and will continue to do so.
I don't know why we have such a bad neighborhood, really, for what, but it's another question, but also regular risk from it. But Yuri, if Putin dumps Trump and his route, maybe then Trump will give us more weapons.
It's hard to imagine having Trump give Ukraine more weapons, and it does run into the neighborhood, because I do not see a way under which I almost want, I don't want to have a wager because I'm not a gambling person, but I'm just really firmly convinced that we're not going to see more military aid that is spearheaded by Trump administration. It seems like they have a real aversion to it, always have, even when there was, years ago, that ended up being an impeachment for President Trump. So I think that President Trump has a real aversion to militarily hitting Vladimir Putin. And I think that that's a real concern. And as going forward, we're only going to see how that aversion to harming Putin and desire to build good relations with Vladimir Putin, how is this going to affect Americans and the world.
We'll see. In this case, Trump gave a big interview for the Fox News and stated that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is ready to negotiate a deal with Russia to end the ongoing conflict. Trump emphasized Zelensky's desire to stop the war, noting the significant losses both Ukraine and Russia have suffered. Let's listen some phrases and then we'll discuss.
And if they don't do that, I'm going to put massive tariffs.
They don't do what?
If they don't settle this war soon, like almost immediately, I'm going to put massive tariffs on Russia and massive taxes and also big sanctions. And I don't want to do that. I love the Russian people. They're great people. I don't want to do that, but we got to get this war ended. And if they don't make a settlement like fast, and Zelensky, I will say this, he wants to settle now. He's had enough. He shouldn't have allowed this to happen either. No. If he's no angel, he shouldn't have allowed this war to happen. First of all, he's fighting a much bigger entity, okay? Much bigger. When he was, talking so brave and so. Now, two things happened. They were brave, but we gave them billions of dollars. The United States spent $200 billion more than Europe. Why did we spend more? You know why? Because Biden never asked Europe to spend more. They spent 200.
It became a U.S.-Russia proxy war because of Joe.
Zelensky was fighting a much bigger entity, much bigger, much more powerful. He shouldn't have done that because we could have made a deal, and it would have been a deal that would have been a nothing deal. I could have made that deal so easily. And Zelensky decided that I want to fight. They have 30,000 army tanks. Russia has 30,000 army tanks. Zelensky had none, practically. You don't fight.
I have few questions. Why doesn't Trump consider Zelensky an angel? And how could Zelensky and we, all Ukraine, not be at war? What deal is Trump talking about in 2022? Should we have just surrendered?
I think that it's almost hard to understand, even if you speak English, because it seems like it almost doesn't make sense. But it does make sense because Donald Trump comes to us from a universe of strong versus weak. This is not right versus wrong. This is not a question of whether Ukraine was in the right. That's not even a question. The question is, Ukraine is weaker than Russia, so what was Ukraine thinking trying to stand up to Russia? This was such a foolish idea, it sounds like, because there was a deal that could have been made. It's hard to understand exactly what deal, but considering that Donald Trump lives in the here and now, and the history may not play a large role. The fact that Russia wanted all of Ukraine, how do you make a deal with that? When Russia wanted to change Ukrainian leadership, how do you make a deal? What kind of a deal are you offering? And the fact that Donald Trump says that he's a deal maker, it's just, I think this is highlighting his importance and relevance going forward. But in reality, he is supporting the strong versus the weak. In a battle, in a case of strong versus weak, it's clearly strong that are strong. And so they deserve all the respect. They deserve all the adherence to their rules. And those that do not understand it right now will understand this very quickly. And I think that it is such a clear and telling statement, interview, really great piece of not necessarily journalism, but almost like documentary, because President Trump feels very much at ease. He's in his comfort. He's back in the White House talking to his favorite TV news presenter in the most friendliest terms. Life is good. And what does he say at this moment? He says Zelensky should have never fought back. What was he thinking? I think that's just, it's a really clear clarification for anybody who was questioning Donald Trump's motives about where his priorities lie and what he would have done if he was in Zelensky's position. Clearly, he would have surrendered. If Donald Trump was president of Ukraine in 2022, he would have done whatever Vladimir Putin wanted much faster than anybody could have possibly imagined, because Donald Trump understands that Vladimir Putin is strong. He has 30,000 tanks or men or whatever. He's a much larger entity. And so that means that he gets whatever he wants. This goes back to the strong do what they will and weak suffer what they must. That's clear.
Okay, Yuri, and we have 2 minutes in short. Please, do we understand now what Trump's position is on China and how he sees its role in the Russian-Ukrainian war?
It is interesting to observe President Trump's fluctuating position on China, where the danger that China presents kind of seems to change on day-to-day basis. But the fact is that even though Elon Musk has a lot of business interests in China, we still have artificial intelligence race with China. We still have trade relations with China. We still have intellectual property theft with China. We still have fentanyl, the drugs. We have a lot of issues with China that demand to be addressed. And so it seems that this is giving President Trump a negotiation opportunity to see what he can do with China. I think that whether the war continues or not, it is in China's general interest to see war continue, because that makes Russia weaker every day. And that means that Russia becomes more dependent on China. And China doesn't even need to invade Russia. It's just Russia is running to China right now for support, because there's nobody else in North Korea. So I think China got itself kind of an interesting neighborhood role as well. And that spells very bad things for Taiwan and its ability to defend itself, and likelihood that President Trump will come to his defense, because let's be real, Taiwan is weak, China is strong. What is Taiwan thinking? Are they going to make a deal? This is their chance.
Yuri, thank you so much for this discussion, for this conversation. See you next week. Take care of yourself, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report, was with us, and my name is Uzlova. Thank you guys for watching. Take care.